Hi, many thanks for joining us. My name is Richard Wiseman. I'm going to do an introduction to the census data from the UK Data Service. So what is the census? So the main function of the census is to count the population, and that is its primary purpose. So in the UK, we don't have a population registration system, unlike a lot of other countries. So the population is counted every 10 years using the census. So when we count the population, we count people at their location and ask questions concerning certain characteristics. And we'll talk about the sort of characteristics covered in the census later. As the census covers almost everyone in the country, it aims to be a full count, it's possible to have outputs available at small geographical levels. And that makes the census very unique, being able to compare different areas at the same time. So the census informs public spending, such as the allocation of local government grants, and this could be the age distribution of areas, so you can decide where best to put schools or care homes, for example. It's also used as a benchmark for many other statistics, so it is used a lot. Okay, so I've been talking as if there is just one census, but in the UK we actually have 3 separate census agencies. There is the Office for National Statistics, which covers England and Wales. In Scotland, there is a National Records of Scotland, or NRS for short. And there's NISRA in Northern Ireland, which is the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency. So there is a lot of coordination between the agencies. Much of the data are comparable. There are some differences, though, to address individual needs of countries. So, for example, Northern Ireland has different questions concerning religion, and Scotland didn't ask a question concerning passports held, but something just to be aware of. The key message is there's a lot of effort is put in to make the outputs as harmonised as possible. Okay, so how was the data collected? Well, ever since 1841, the census has been collected by self-completion, and this is where the household receives a form and the householder fills it in. In 2011, it was something called post out and post back, but there was an option to complete the census online in 2011, and around 15% of people in England and Wales filled it in online. I'd have thought it'd be more than that. Next time round, in the 2021 census, they will be having online completion as the default method. So by using post out and post back, as opposed to sending people out to deliver and collect forms, meant that census offices could focus their resources on areas that are hard to count. Let's have a look about what questions were asked. And so the census covers a lot of different areas. So there's questions, simple data on age, sex, country of birth, short-term residence, and whether people are planning on staying in the UK. Question on ethnicity, religion, and religion's an optional one, so people don't have to answer that one. There's questions on passports held, which was first asked in last census in 2011. Language, whether you speak English or other languages. National identity, again, that was a question that was first introduced in the last census. Whether you're British, Welsh, Scottish, etc. Question on household relationships, marital status, whether you have a second home, and migration, which is shows where you, I think there's a question on where you lived a year before, so compared to now. There's household level questions such as tenure, whether you're renting privately, socially, owner-occupied, accommodation types such as if you live in a detached house, a terraced house, a flat, etc. Whether you have a car or a van, central heating, number of bedrooms, number of rooms, that sort of thing. And there's socioeconomic questions such as your health, unpaid care, qualifications, economic activity, occupation, industry, travel to work, and so on. So it covers a lot of different topics, but topics don't necessarily go into a lot of detail, so it's fairly broad. And there's always a tension between keeping the census form as short as possible versus obtaining detailed information. Okay, so in order to get a complete count and the census they always want to get as complete count as possible, it was necessary to establish a good quality address register. So since the forms were sent out, you want to make sure they're going to where people actually live. And this was done with a lot of cooperation with local authorities and other organisations, because what you don't want to happen is to have an outdated list of addresses for certain areas. So there was a goal to get a response rate of 94%, and 94% is incredible by the standards of most surveys. For a standard survey, response rate of 65% would be considered good, and this high goal reflects that filling in the census is actually a legal obligation. And there was also a goal for no local authority to go below 80%, and they did meet these goals. So in common with other surveys, low response rates were found for young men, those who are born overseas, those who live alone, and so it does matter if some groups aren't counted, as that introduces bias. And also a coverage survey took place to capture people, to estimate who were missing. So the census data isn't just the people who were enumerated, but also estimations for people who were missed. So if certain groups are not counted, it introduces biases. If you want to know more about that, there's a lot of detail on the Office for National Statistics website. Another critical thing about the census is the promise of confidentiality. Respondents are assured that their data will remain confidential for 100 years. So there is a legal obligation for the census agencies not to make that data available, and only to make data available that is non-identifiable. And so this does have implications on the type of data that can be released. And this is the text that would have appeared on the census form. So basically, confidential personal information top priority for the census. Personal information is not shared with any other government department, local councils and marketing companies, and it's used solely to produce statistics for research and doesn't receive any personal information. So confidentiality is critical in deciding about the sort of outputs that can be released, and the level of detail is critical. So you might be able to get lots of information about where someone lives, or you might be able to get lots of information about their socioeconomic characteristics, but what you're not going to get is lots of detail about both, because then that's potentially identifiable. So for example, if you knew someone age 41 who was born in Norway, that wouldn't be enough to identify them, as there's possibly lots of people with those characteristics in the UK, but if that data is available at a really small geographical level, perhaps cross-tabulated with some other information, then that might be sufficient to identify them. So generally, there's a trade-off between the amount of geography and the amount of socioeconomic detail, but not both. Unless the data is available in a controlled way. So and I'm going to talk about the different sort of outputs in a minute, but you can see aggregate data has lots of geography, something called safeguarding microdata, it's lots of socioeconomic detail, but not much geography, and almost in between is controlled data where you have to go through some hoops to get hold of the more potentially disclosive information. Okay, so talking about the different data types, so we divide them into microdata, and these are just samples of individual level data, and it is just a sample about between 1 and 10%. Details limited to protect confidentiality, and there's aggregate data, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is counts of combinations of characteristics for areas. There's flow data, which has 2 different geographies, an origin and a destination. So we're talking about mostly commuting and migration data there. And there's boundary data. It's a GIS files, which will enable you to map the data. What we're not going to talk about, or what we don't host at the UK Data Service, is longitudinal microdata, but this is available, and you can see the link there if you're interested in that. It's calls.ac.uk. Okay, so microdata, this is individual level data, and this is the sort of data, if you did a survey yourself, it's what the data would look like. it contains personal household characteristics. It's only a sample, about 1 to 10%. So why use this type of data? Well, it's really flexible. You can create your own tables, you can combine characteristics to create new ones, and you can define subpopulations. You can undertake multivariate analysis. But it's only samples, so as I said, about 1 to 10% depending on the data. But because the census covers almost everybody in the country, although it's a sample, it's still a huge amount of data. Geographical detail is limited, and I'll show that in a slide or two. I'm not going to go through this one because I think I have a table giving some details of the different census microdata next. Yes, I do. So you can see this is all the different microdata. There's teaching, which is 1%, and you can see there's only eight age groups. For occupation, for example, 9 classes, ethnic group, 5 classes. Safeguarding data, this is available at region and local authorities above a certain number. 5%, you see there's much more detail in age categories, much more detail in occupation and ethnic groups. And then you get to secure, where you have to be an approved researcher, go through some more hoops, and that's 10%, a lot more detail for these categories here. So that's just the examples of the different types of microdata there is. Okay, so I talked about microdata, but there's also aggregate data, also known as data areas. And these are counts of people or households, for example, with particular combinations of characteristics for an area. And the areas vary from large, so country level, right down to very small areas like output area level, which is about 125 households, I think. So the ability to get these data at such small areas is a unique feature of the census. It allows researchers to reliably compare different areas. So an example is census aggregate data is the number of females aged 30 to 34 and married and live in private rented accommodation in the county of Devon. All of this data it's not a sample, it's kind of the full counts. Just to try to visually explain aggregate data, so if you have the country and you've divided it up into lots of different areas, that's what aggregate data would look like. So you've got 17 people with certain characteristics here versus 35 people with certain characteristics. And once you download the data on one of our interfaces, so here's an example showing religion. So you can see here that there's 48 people aged 16 to 24 following the Muslim religion who live in Carlisle. And that's simply what aggregate data looks like. So I talked a bit about geography before. So we have a lot of different geographies in the UK, and they do change over time as well. And this is what we have in our interface called Infuse, and I'm going to do a demo of this interface right at the end of the session, but you can see there's UK level data right at the top. Some of these are England only, the Green's UK coverage, so local authorities, for example, and the sports, and it goes all the way down to the smallest. The output areas are called small areas in Scotland. And these are the building blocks of the census, basically. So we have data at all these levels. There are other geographies as well, though. So we have two interfaces for the aggregate data. We've got a tool called Infuse and a tool called CASWeb. And just to let you know, the older census data, well, we have 2011 down to 1971 census data. So we have two different tools at the moment, and that's where you can access the different census years. So I already mentioned CASWeb, and there's the URL, 71 to 2001 data. You select the data by table. You don't have to log in or anything. This data is open to everyone and open government license. There's very little restriction. For the more recent census data, we have something called Infuse. So this is a tool where you can download 2011 UK aggregate data. We also have 2001 England and Wales data in there as well. It integrates the metadata, you select by topic or geography, and again, it's open to everyone. Okay, so I've talked about microdata, I've talked about aggregate data, but we also have boundary data, and this is for people who have some GIS skills, I guess. And we have 71 to 2011 boundary data, but there's also some historical boundaries. Most of the data is open to all, although some of the older stuff is restricted to academia. A variety of GIS formats, such as shapefiles, mapinfo, KLM. And these data are delivered through two main applications, something called Easy Download, which is most regularly requested boundaries in one go, or there's Boundary Data Selector, which allows you to subset. So if you wanted boundaries for a particular local authority at ward level or something, you can do that in there. There's a tool called Thematic Mapper, which if you don't have any GIS skills, you could upload your file as long as it's got the right codes and create a simple choropleth map as well. So check that out if you have an interest in that area. So as I showed you this slide before, it's just to reiterate that we have all of these boundaries and more as well for the boundary data, which goes with the aggregate data. And this is visually just what the boundaries look like by themselves. Just for England, this is regions, and then there's lots of different geographical levels. Down here, I'm assuming this would be wards. I've zoomed into, I think that's Merseyside and the Wirral. And there you can see this is output areas, so they're the really tiny areas. And it just lets you see visually how granular the boundaries are. But what makes it more interesting is once you combine the aggregate data with the boundary data, and this is a simple map I did which shows the percentage of people born in the UK with no passport during the 2011 census. So I think I took that, there was a question on passports held, which included no passport, and I did it by country of birth as well. Okay, so we also have something called census flow data, and this is a special type of aggregate data where there is an origin and a destination. And there's two main types. There's commuting, so travel to work, and migration. On the census, there was a question about, I think you had to give your postcode or your address of where you worked, so they calculate where you work to where you live. And there's questions on your method of travel to work, if it's by train and whatever. So this data is that. And same with migration, there's a question on where you lived. I think it was a year ago. And it was 1981 to 2011 census flow data we have, but there is also non-census flow data in there as well. There are different access levels. Most of the data is open, but some of the 2011 data is restricted to academia, and as well as outside of academia, it's I think basically there's restrictions on commercial usage, but there's more information about that on the website. And this flow data has its own website, so wicked.uk, dataservice.ac.uk. Okay, this is a very simple example of flow data, so travel by train in local authorities. So you can see this is where people live, and this is their destination where they work, and you can see these are the people who live and work in the same local authority are definitely down there. And that's very basically what census flow data is. Okay, so I'm now going to give a quick demo of our website, which is ukdataservice.ac.uk, but particularly just looking at the census data on there. So I'm going to switch Okay, so this is the main UK Data Service website. Now you can search as well, but I'm just interested in the census data, and there's different routes to the data. But if we go down to census data here, you can see our subsite. There's different things on the website. So I'll start with, before I forget, it should be under here, I'm hoping. If we go to news and events, just to let you know, if you are in London, we are doing a workshop specifically about census aggregate and census flow data. And there's some details about that there. It's just a half-day workshop, so book on if you're interested in doing more, and there'll be some hands-on demos. As well as that, I'll start with going to use data. This tab here, we do have some guides about the data, information if you want to know how to cite the data if you've used it. It's not as good to cite data, obviously. That's here. If you go to About UK Censuses, see, probably a little bit buried actually, but census forms. So sometimes if you're using data, it's good to actually look at the original form and see how the question was worded, and that will give you a feel on actually what data's in there as well. If you want to see the original forms, they're all in there. Definitions, we have these basically, I think they're all in PDF format throughout the year, so it's 71 to 2011. So we've got the forms there, and there's other information. But to get the data, which is what most people are after, just click on Get Census Data, and you can see, so I've talked about the different data types throughout this presentation, and they're here. So aggregate data, I'm going to do a demo of that in a moment, but you can see there's two different applications there. Flow data, application called Wicked is there, the microdata, and this is all the different ones here. And boundary data, again, there's quite a few different interfaces in there. I'll do a very quick demo of Infuse. Okay, so we want 2011 data, and we have a choice between geography or topics first, and I'm going to go to pick my geography first. So not all data is available at all geographical levels. So basically, if you go for a lower geography, you're going to get less categories. So if I was interested in a particular area, and you've got all the different countries here, you can take as many as little of them as you want. I'm going to expand local authorities, and I'm going to scroll down and find Manchester, because that's where I'm based. Right, I'm going to tick Manchester, and I'll tick wards and electoral divisions. Actually, I'm going to go to the top and tick England as well, and then scroll right along. Let's scroll all the way to the bottom, because expanded stuff, click Add. And then I've selected geography, so I basically selected England, Manchester, and the 32 wards within the local authority of Manchester. And I'll click Next. And here you can see, so it's talking about all of the different topics, so you can cross-tabulate a lot of the topics, not necessarily all of them. And by default, all of the combinations are available. Now you can see straight away some of these are grayed out. This is because I've picked a specific geography. I've picked wards in Manchester. So stuff, I think the end is Northern Ireland basically, stuff are greyed out that just aren't available either for the whole of England or for whatever, for the ward level data. I'm going to tick industry, so scroll down, tick. Now maybe I want that by sex. If I scroll down and tick, so you can see not everything's available with industry, quite a lot isn't, but I'll click sex. And there, I'm going to pick the simplest one, age, economic activity, industry by sex. Click that. Now you are presented with a definition of the variables you've selected, and then click next again. And now you have the opportunity to pick as little of these categories as you want. I'm just going to go for age 16 to 74, manufacturing industry, males, females, and click Add. Definition there. Click Next again. summary, click get data, and download. And that's it. You've got the citation file in there that tells you how to cite the data. Metadata, that just has the definitions, but the actual data itself is this file here. And you can see we did England, Manchester, got the figures there, and all the different wards. And they're really long labels actually, but this is basically males, what we picked, and this is females. And you can see, for example, there's 223 males working in the manufacturing industry who live in furniture. Okay, and that's my demo of Infuse.